A teacher of mine used to say, you must do for the love of others what you're not willing to do for yourself. We must do for the love of others what we're not willing to do for ourselves. In this moment when we're facing the great unraveling collectively, the dismantling of so many systems that we relied upon for so long, the emergence of climate change in a faster pace than any of us expected, so many of our human systems unraveling. There's tremendous opportunity to meet the task at hand, which is to dream a new dream together, which is to choose, because we have a conscious choice in every moment for how we impact and act from consciousness, new stories. And this relates directly to the process of conscious intentions. The entire path of creating and cultivating long-term change within oneself, in one's life, as I stated, for those of you who were there for the tail end of yesterday's session, can only emerge from we consciousness. It cannot happen either on behalf of the separate self or ego or from the doing of separate self or ego. That would be a tireless activity, which would lead nowhere. It all comes from we consciousness. So I want to remind us all that our personal awakening is 100% intertwined with collective awakening. There is no pursuit of personal awakening separate from the collective. It would take you nowhere. It would not nourish your soul's fire, your yearning for the connectedness, the non-separation that deep within all of us know. A core wound in each and every one of us is the wound from this separation, the wound of knowing absolute interdependence, and then also knowing your experience in a world that dishonors that, the fracture, okay? And so our intentions process and the way that we actually support this human, each of us have our own responsibility, our own karma to turn into dharma. We only can approach this pursuit when we're crystal clear that collective, on behalf of the collective, on behalf of all beings, is our motivation. There is no other motivation that will get you anywhere. And there's no other motivation that will nourish you in any way whatsoever. You could try, but it wouldn't work. So no separation, okay? Your personal liberation from the bullshit in your head, from our collective stories, from any habit patterns that don't serve you, from the myth of separation, is fully intertwined with collective transformation. This is really important to name. So, as human beings, we exist in 3 domains. And I don't share what I'm about to share with any sense of hierarchical perceptions. It's not one domain is higher, the higher self, than the other. It's just that they all are, they all exist, and we exist in sometimes a struggle, hopefully a dance between these domains. And so the first, this is one that many of us remember so directly through our meditation practice, yet there are so many paths that lead home. So you can reflect as I share this one, what are some of the ways or the pathways that support you to fully remember, well, what I speak of often as interconnection and non-local awareness, the interconnection of all beings. So what I meant to say was interconnection and interconnection. This is the first domain, the domain of love, the domain of knowing ourselves as consciousness itself, the domain of life animating us. Sometimes we speak of this as Buddha nature. As my father was a contemplative Christian, I know the Christians sometimes would speak of it as the hidden foundation of goodness. Every spiritual path and tradition has different language pointing to, but a couple of the qualities of this field, which is a love that weaves through everything. It's here in every moment. It never leaves you. You sometimes leave it, okay? Is we consciousness. It's the consciousness that is shared, that is connected, that is not separate. And this place, this field is, we experience it in many qualities, but one is boundlessness, limitlessness, vastness. So just as an example, many of you who know me personally know I'm a teeny tiny person in physical form. I'm very petite, and yet I experience my physicality as boundless because I get to spend a lot of time in this domain. It's boundless energy. And as I'm speaking, each and every one of you knows this place in your own experience, okay? Before I go on to the second and third domain, I want to remind us that the reason we practice paying attention moment by moment, the reason we practice subtle awareness is that there's no use whatsoever thinking about the things I'm talking about right now. It's about being able to feel and sense literally the vibration of when we're in one domain and the other, and when we're dancing between a couple and knowing where we are. That's part of seeing clearly, the invitation of meditation practice, okay? And so the next domain is the domain we might call of ordinary, everyday human existence, or the animal realm, our animal experience. I want to read just a couple of notes I made to myself about this domain. And so I wrote, animal life, the red rose, the color deep red, fighting and fucking and laughing and mating and birthing, and the ideas and dramas and grasping and pushing away of ideas and dramas all around what love is. So while the first domain is the actual experience of love itself, this is all that we do around love, okay? The longing, the lust, the blood process, the animal carnation, weaving the business of life, the immersion of life. So the message is I am animal interacting with my environment, the goodness of that, yeah, because each of these domains is whole. And knowing also that when it turns to emotion, the psychological drama and the ancient stories that can be really grabby, really grabby. So if we just identify with this domain, certainly there will not be full satisfaction for our soul. Sometimes in Buddhism, we talk about the dance of living with one life planted in the absolute. That's the vast place I spoke of. And one foot planted in the relative world, where yes, we're waking up in a world where we get on a screen and there are conditioned messages and shared collective stories, but they're stories, they're not absolute. And this relative world, okay? Where again, in this relative world, I'm really very tiny, petite, but I experience myself in the absolute as vast, boundless, okay? And so just naming these different vibrations. I also want to underline that while the first domain really is the experience directly of love, like it's the place where we're actually not afraid of death because there is nothing to fear when there's not separation. But of course, in the animal realm, there can be lots of fear of death, right? And so in this animal realm, we often grapple with our stories around love. I want to have had attachment parenting and I didn't. So something's wrong, something's off in my life until that's fixed. love is a long reach away. I'm not going to get it. Or I want a love who loves me passionately, and I don't have that. And so until I get that, I'm a reach away. Or something has happened in my life that caused so much damage that, again, until that's mended, and I'm separate from love. And so I want to underline that in our practice, we actually learn how to both hold and show up for the healing of those specific occurrences in our lives, those fractures, while also understanding clearly, seeing clearly that wholeness is here, right here and now. Yes, with my fractures. Yes, with my trauma. Yes, with that which I don't accept in myself. There's a place to relax into, to rest, to reside. It's also Gaia consciousness, for those of you who prefer that language. It's the interconnectedness. So it's the experience of yourself as part of all beings, part of your ancestors, part of the unborns, the future beings, part of the land, not separate from any of it. There's no fear of death when we know ourselves as not separate. So again, many of us go in and out of identification with the animal being and this other place. There's a third domain that is really important to the intentions process that I want to speak to today. It's also the domain that I'm most interested in humanity whetting their thirst for right now. And this third domain is the domain that bridges the first two. This is the domain of the dreamer. This is the domain of the active dreaming state, both in the diurnal and nocturnal existence, in which we are willing to actively reimagine. We're willing to acknowledge, certainly as Buddhism teaches, that all of life is a dream. And similar to the kind of curiosity we can ignite at nighttime in our actual dream state. Some of you might have, raise your hand, any of you who have dreaming practices, nocturnal dreaming practices, okay? So you know that dreams themselves can become a spiritual practice, the domain of acknowledging, I am both asleep and awake at the same time, awake to choice, awake to the illusory nature of what is being presented in this dream. And so aware of my choice. And we bring that same mentality as practitioners. This is Buddha Dharma that I'm sharing right now, but it's also shamanism. It's also so many other wisdom traditions across the globe that help us to remember we can bring that same quality of awareness, the dreamer, the wisdom of the dreamer that says what appears as real, what appears as set in stone, actually is not. And I'm willing to look from the heart. I'm willing to learn how to see in the dark from a different perception, to question what appears to be set in stone. And guess what? That includes your stories. That includes your limiting stories, even if you've held them your whole life. So this is a really exciting domain. While the first domain is love itself, the second domain is what we do around love. This is a more active expression of love. And two more things about this I want to share. Number one, I want to be really clear that the teaching I want to emphasize right now is on behalf of all beings, living, loving, acting, working, listening, giving ourselves to life on behalf of all beings, and giving ourselves to living with the support of all beings. It can be there, but if you're up here in story, you're not going to hear it, you're not going to feel it, you're going to push it away, you're going to stay in your separate self story. And we don't need more separate self on our globe right now. It's caused so much collective harm. We are potentially not going to exist too much longer as a species. Now, we don't know that yet. What we do know is it's time to dream new dreams. And it's also time to access what I call visionary activism. We don't have too much time to talk about this today, but this is the acknowledgement that we cannot meet the challenges we face as a collective from the rational, logical, anthropocentric conditioned mind. that has led humanity for so long. So I saw someone asked a question on the shared document about, I get it, the need to find our essence and to really live from essence, but do we have time for this when there's so much work to do? There is no separation. There is no separation. The world's challenges cannot be met from the rational, logical, separate self mind. This conditioning, this separation, this fracture has to be healed if anything's going to be healed. It's the number one work of this time, and it's not separate from outer actions we take. Because here's the thing, the more we understand, I'm not a separate self. Even in creating my new intention, which perhaps you want to empower you, I want to be empowered and can only empower myself through the remembrance of myself as not separate, on behalf of all beings. What that means is that we honor and acknowledge our responsibility to all beings. We honor and acknowledge how supported we are by all beings. And we find this courage because on behalf of all beings, I'm willing to do stuff I would not be willing to do just for myself or from my little bubble. I'm willing to find a level of freedom because I want it for the collective. Can you nod if you're with me? I'm willing to choose freedom, which is scary for some of us, which takes letting go of old stories, which a lot of us have many built-in forms of resistance to. But guess what? I'm willing to do it because I want it for the collective, because I understand there's no other choice for humanity. There is none. There is none. So I'm willing to find my own freedom for that reason. For that reason. And this is a game changer. This is the game changer. So every time we practice, when we come to meditation, it might at first seem hard to sustain a meditation practice. You might have stories that say, but I'm not getting what I thought I would get, or my mind's too busy. That's because you're thinking about it as a pursuit of personal awakening. It's not. When you get it that every time you show up to sit, it's on behalf of the collective, and that every time you sit and rest in silence, even for a few minutes, you're resting in the field of collective connective tissue, the mycelia, the hidden foundation of quiet, the vibration of non-separation. That's what you're reconnecting to. So it's all for all beings. That's what the game changer is. And that gives you access to, I'm going to go back to our first quote that I always share at the beginning of this retreat, Tartong Tolku, the Tibetan Lama, who says, energy is our most precious resource, for it is the means through which we transform our creative potential into meaningful action. Well, guess what? It's not just talking about physical energy. No, it's not talking about the energy you get from caffeine and energy bars and things of that nature. A little bit of an addiction in our society. I got to keep the energy up. I got to manage this energy. I need high energy. I got to be young. This is spiritual energy we're talking about. And guess what? Spiritual energy is something that we gather. We gather when we surrender our lives to the on behalf of all beings. It's that simple. When we do that, everything opens up because we're willing to receive beyond our defense mechanisms or our victim stories, the support of life. And we're willing to act on behalf of life. And again, this could be specific. When I say act, this takes many, many forms. I teach spiritual activism. So this could be specific actions that we're taking in response to climate change, or this could be the act of choosing patience rather than reactivity in a really intense conflict. But it's that spiritual energy on behalf of all beings that gives you the willingness to be patient. Can people nod if you know what I'm pointing to? It takes so many different forms. It's the act of being generous. I am willing to reach out and be generous in this situation. where I could serve, or I'm willing to help this human, this one right here, the one who is 100% my responsibility, step into a new shape in her life that she's always been afraid to step into. Because guess what? Every one of her ancestors is rooting for her, and they need her to heal the family lineage or whatever it is. Like, your courage is needed for the whole. So we don't do this for ourselves. If you can start letting that idea dissolve, you'll be way more supported. I can't tell you how much in my own personal life has healed through the spiritual energy, and continues to every single day, through the spiritual energy that has been gathered by my willingness to completely be used by spirit. How can I be of service to the collective is the question. Yeah. If I had one goal for the entire year and was only allowed to make one, it would simply be to show up for all of my appointments with love. Yeah. On behalf of the whole. But we're actually later going to make some more specific goals, because that's really fun. Just a couple more points about this. And one is, I really do want to just give people the sense of possibility that even when there are stories that seem so deeply ingrained and like, oh, I've tried, no, I've done therapy on this one for years, so sorry, I just know it's unchangeable. And spiritual energy is our willingness to cultivate shared power instead of the power over model. So shared power is authentic power. It's power with, and it's again a level of energy. We know not where it comes. It comes from the invisible, in other words. And even at times when we think we don't have what it takes, we can reach down deep into this well of energy. This energy equates to nature's might. So think volcanoes, think tornadoes, think that, the core of the earth. This is an energy that we tap into when we give ourselves, okay, to collective healing. And it can't be used selfishly. That's just not, though actually I'm going to take that back. It has to be minded well so that it's not used selfishly. I think many of us can think of stories of wise, brilliant spiritual teachers, Dharma teachers included, who've misused this spiritual power over time, okay? When I spoke of the animal realm, I just want to emphasize something really important. In many spiritual traditions, historically for humanity, part of what's led us to a legacy of so much harm, there has been a real devotion to hierarchical perception, and therefore a devotion to seeing spirit as higher than body and higher and separate from the animal realm. So we're all trying to get to enlightenment, trying to transcend, trying to get to the light, trying to push away the suffering of our world, trying to erase the icky aspects of our lives, trying to transcend, okay? As many of you know, my passion right now is for the need for endarkenment alongside enlightenment. This means the willingness to go deep down into our, not just our bodies, our earth bodies, our knowing through experience of ourselves as part of the natural feedback system of the earth, and going down into exactly the suffering that has arisen in our life as portal to healing, exactly the suffering that's here in our world right now. You all incarnated at this particular time. I'm curious why. I suspect to be part of this collective time of healing and change. And I say that without any knowledge or attachment to any outcome. I just mean that it's certainly a time when we are being asked deeply to act on behalf of consciousness. Yeah. So let me just pause for a moment and notice if anything else needs to come through right now. Yes, it does. And what that is I want to be really clear about one nuance in what I'm saying. It's really popular in our world through the illusion of separate self to have this whole kind of separation between, like, I have a choice to either take care of this human or self-care or take care of what I need right now or be of service. And they're seen as separate. And then people get into all of these dances around depletion and being of over service, but abandoning, depleting the self. There's a different paradigm available through what I'm speaking of today, and it's through knowing oneself in the experience of we consciousness. There is no self and other. And so we learn that even the willingness and generosity of giving directly to this human, when that's what life is calling for, of invoking even more joy and embodiment and beauty and humor and connectedness in this person's life, that too is on behalf of the whole. Again, that there is no separation. Okay, so life just gets more and more and more fun, and equally more and more of service. Okay, they go hand in hand. So I want to pause. Just invite you to close your eyes for a minute. And I'm going to invite you, just sort of as we continue this retreat every now and then, to do so now, to just remember the darkness, the physical and symbolic, metaphorical darkness, just to remember that this space you're in was dark hours ago and will be pitch black dark in some hours to come. And to let yourself close your eyes now and then, just to remember this space, this field of the world beyond what we see and the world beyond what we think is set in stone, the unformed, and to just hold that in your awareness a little more often. A way of integrating, which many traditions have different paths for doing this, the daytime human and the dreamer more fully. Okay? So please open your eyes.